The mental lexicon, the dictionary that we have in our mind. So we have just discussed studies, different studies, the different tests that was designed to understand the productivity of the language. So studies of the sort we have just discussed have goals beyond linguistic description and aim rather to describe what is actually going on in the brain of the language user when they use simple and complex words. So in this regard, we have psycholinguistics who study this phenomenon taking place in the mind or brain of the people, where, however, the neurolinguists also enter when the measuring comes to take place, and also the cognitive scientists are also found in this field. So all these three, psycholinguist, the neurolinguist and neuroscientist, study mind and language in their own ways. The goal of psycholinguistic and neurolinguistic research on morphology is to understand exactly how the mental lexicon works. How do we use different words, right? Why we have appropriate word at the appropriate situation. The lexicon that all language users store in their brains. So Pinker is a very lively and informal presentation. So he has discussed major issues in this field, psycholinguistics. Etchison has talked about the same topic in a very general way. It is important to remember to distinguish the lexicon itself from how it is used by the speaker or the hearer. So here one is lexicon and one how it is used. So these are two different issues, used by the speaker as well as by the hearer. Most studies of the mental lexicon are concerned with word recognition, a classic problem in psychology. How do people associate the speech and writing signal with the entries in their mental lexicon? When we listen to certain words, so how do these words form into a certain meaning decoded in our mind? So this is one of the main problem question of the researcher. Until very recently, most word recognition studies dealt mostly with written words, not speech. So the emphasis, because the store of the words was there in the form of written words. So the researchers focused on the written word, and the data of oral speech was not as much available, so it was delayed. Psychologists were interested in how people recognize words, both their sound and their meaning when they read. So this was an interesting question for the psychologist. When I'm reading something, right, when I'm listening something, how do I associate the sound of the word to the sound to the word and also the meaning of the words? How does it take place that as language user we understand what is being said or what we read? Only in the last 20 years or so have psychologists turned their attention to spoken words. Spoken word recognition, which for linguists at least is a much more interesting and certainly more basic problem than reading. Since linguistics focuses on oral speech than on written, so this was good for the linguists that the psychologists also started giving their attention to the oral words, to the speech. After all, as linguists have known for over a century, the primary form of language is spoken, not written. The basic and universal task of word recognition is thus spoken word recognition. How do we recognize a certain word when we listen to it? From an experimental point of view, it has always been much easier to deal with written text than with speech, which is why it is only recently, with the advent of tools for regularizing the speech signals that these psycholinguists have begun to turn to spoken language recognition. The other side of accessing the mental lexicon, and in some sense the opposite of reverse of word recognition, is word production. That how do we produce word? When we are speaking, how do we bring words to our articulatory system? How words are encoded to the system, and how do we find that which word to use at which time or in a certain situation? When a person speaks, how does that person know what word to use and the words that will eventually come out of his or her mouth? That's very strange. This was the problem of the linguist, obviously of the psychologist too. This is much more difficult problem than word recognition and has received much less attention from psycholinguists. Most psycholinguists assume that there is only one mental lexicon and that both word recognition and word production access this same lexicon, though in different ways. So this is their conclusion, that we as language users have one dictionary, one lexicon, while we receive words or when we produce word, we use the same lexicon. For an experimental perspective, though, the mental lexicon is not something that we can study directly. However, it is very difficult to make certain experiment on this lexicon to understand the working of the lexicon. So, thus we study it rather only through the intermediaries of production and recognition, both of which must access this dictionary hidden deeply within our head. So this is the conclusion, that what we can do is to understand our brain, that how it uses this dictionary which is hidden deep in the mind. So it is approached through certain mediatory methods. So there is one lexicon which is used for both recognition and production of the words.